I had been managing restaurants for years, long shifts, dealing with stressed out customers and frantic kitchen staff, running from one problem to the next. The pressure was constant, and after a while, it started to wear on me. I realized I wanted something different, something quieter. I was 32, and I had a dream to open my own coffee shop, a place where people could gather, relax, and just enjoy a good cup of coffee. So, I left my old life behind in the city and moved to a small town in Oregon. This quiet town, surrounded by dense forests and a large lake, seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. I wasn't unfamiliar with hard work. Over the years, I had developed a solid routine. Hit the gym every morning, read business books to improve my skills, and spend time outdoors, hiking whenever I could. The peace of the forest had always grounded me. I figured this town, with its quiet streets and small local businesses, was just what I needed. The first few days were peaceful. I rented a small house on the edge of town and started scouting locations for my coffee shop. The town was small, everyone knew each other, and newcomers were rare. It felt like everyone had their place, and the rhythm of life moved at a slower pace than what I was used to. The town seemed almost perfect. But then, I met Victor Hale, my neighbor. Victor was one of those people who stood out, even in a town where everyone else seemed to blend into the background. He lived just a few houses down, near the lake. His appearance was striking. Tall, thin, and wiry. His hair was a messy tangle of unkempt strands that fell into his eyes, giving him a wild look. No matter the weather, he always wore the same old coat. It was tattered and faded, like it had seen better days, and it hung loosely around his frame. The first time I met him, I was unloading boxes from my car, trying to settle into my new home. He approached me slowly, his eyes studying me, but not in a welcoming way. It was like he was trying to figure me out, studying my every move. The smile he gave me felt too wide, too eager, as if he were trying too hard to be friendly. "Hey there," he said, his voice a little too smooth. "I'm Victor. You must be the new guy. Moving here to start fresh, huh?" I nodded, offering a small smile. "Yeah, I'm Ryan. Just trying to get everything settled." He stepped a little closer, almost too close, but I didn't think much of it. He seemed like he was just trying to be friendly. "Good to have someone new around. There's not much going on here, but it's peaceful," he said, his eyes not leaving mine. He had a strange way of speaking, though, like he was always holding something back. His gaze lingered a little too long, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than what he was letting on. Still, I chalked it up to the fact that I was new in town, and maybe he was just eager to make a connection. He did, after all, offer to help me carry in my boxes. As the days passed, I started seeing more of Victor. He'd show up unannounced, often standing by the edge of my property, watching me work or walk to the store. I never felt entirely comfortable with his presence, but he wasn't overtly aggressive or rude, so I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He was just different. Victor had this way of talking about the lake, too, that set me on edge. "You'll love the lake," he said one day, when I mentioned I was thinking of hiking around it. "It's beautiful, but people tend to avoid it at night. You'll understand why once you get to know the place better." The way he said it, with such a strange, almost secretive tone, made me curious. But I didn't press him on it. I figured it was just his eccentric way of talking. He was, after all, just another oddball in a small town, right? It wasn't until one evening that things took a turn. I had just locked up my rental house for the night when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Victor. "Hey, I just found the perfect location for your coffee shop. You're gonna love this. It's by the lake, secluded, peaceful, and super cheap." I hesitated. The lake area was remote, definitely not the kind of location I had in mind for a business. But Victor had been so insistent. Maybe he knew something I didn't. So I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Before I could reply, my phone rang. It was Victor. "Dude, just come check it out," he said, his voice too enthusiastic. "I'm already here. It's only a 5-minute drive. You won't regret it. Trust me." Something about his tone rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't fully trust him, but I didn't want to seem rude. "All right, fine. I'll be there in 10. I grabbed my car keys and left, my mind swirling with doubt. The drive was unsettling. The road to the lake was narrow and winding, barely lit by the distant streetlights. The deeper I drove into the woods, the quieter it became. The stillness was unnerving. When I finally arrived, I could see the dim glow of a lantern near the water. Victor stood beside a small fire, a large pot sitting over it. The area was completely silent, save for the faint crackling of the fire and the occasional chirp of crickets. I stepped out of my car, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. "What's with the pot?" I asked, frowning as I walked toward him. "You cooking something?" Victor turned slowly, smiling that same strange smile. "Not cooking yet, but I will. Now that you're here." I felt my blood run cold. There was something wrong in his eyes, something sinister in the way he spoke. But before I could react, he lunged at me with surprising speed, his hands reaching for me. Adrenaline kicked in, and my gym training took over. I dodged his first attack, my reflexes faster than I'd expected. Victor was strong, but not as strong as he looked. His wiry frame didn't give him much power, and I was able to push him back. But he wasn't finished. He grabbed a knife from his coat, his eyes wild. He swung it toward me with such force that I barely managed to duck out of the way. My heart was pounding as I punched him hard in the chest, knocking the knife from his grasp. I turned and ran as fast as I could toward my truck. Behind me, I heard Victor screaming, his voice echoing across the dark lake. "You can't leave. You'll never leave." The words rang in my ears as I jumped into my truck, started the engine, and sped away without looking back. The police arrived soon after I called, and they quickly apprehended Victor near the lake. He didn't resist, but the way he looked at me, those cold, empty eyes, still haunted me. The townspeople knew him as a local oddity. He had a history of strange behavior, but nothing ever serious enough to warrant arrest. They told me he had been a patient at the local psychiatric facility, but nothing ever came of it. Victor was taken into custody for psychiatric evaluation, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I had moved to this town for a fresh start, but now I realized that some places and some people were better left unexplored. The next morning, I packed up my things. I couldn't stay there anymore. I sold the plans for the coffee shop, packed my bags, and left that town behind. The lake and its secrets would remain a mystery, one I didn't want to be part of. As I drove away, I looked back one last time. Some places aren't meant for outsiders, and some neighbors are better left unknown. I've always loved the peace of small-town life. The quiet streets, the scent of pine in the air, and the distant howl of a coyote on cold Montana nights. It was like a slow, comforting lullaby. Everyone knew everyone, and crime was something that happened in big cities, not here. Or so I thought. Living in this town, a place so small that you couldn't walk 5 steps without someone waving hello, had its perks. You knew everyone, and everyone knew you. It was the kind of town where your secrets stayed buried, and no one locked their doors at night. The idea of anything bad happening here seemed impossible. I'm a 25-year-old guy, working the night shift at the local printing press. It's a simple job, but it gets me by. I'm not the most social person, never was. I enjoy my solitude, and I've always found comfort in small, quiet things. like fixing up my dad's old truck or playing guitar on those late nights when the world feels just a little too loud. I don't need much. Just the quiet and the few things that make me feel like I'm in control of my life. That night, after finishing my shift, I was doing what I always do, walking home. I enjoy it, honestly. There's something about the night air, the emptiness of it all, that lets my mind wander. I knew every shortcut, every corner, every street. It was routine, peaceful. But tonight, my world was about to crumble. The town was empty, like always. The only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the distant cry of a coyote echoing from the forest that surrounded the town. It was a clear night, the kind where the stars glimmered against a dark canvas, and the air was crisp with the smell of pine and damp earth. I had just passed the old, abandoned gas station, a place where kids used to hang out in their teens, but now it stood desolate, with cracked windows and graffiti scrawled on the walls. The streetlights flickered occasionally, casting long, eerie shadows across the road. I was almost home, just a few more blocks, when I heard it. Footsteps. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, it was late, but this was a small town. Who else would be out here? Maybe someone else was on their way home, or maybe a stray dog was wandering the street. But then, the footsteps grew louder, closer. My gut twisted. It was too rhythmic, too purposeful. I turned the corner near the gas station, and that's when I saw him. A masked figure, dressed head to toe in black, emerged from the shadows. He moved quickly, faster than I could react, and before I even had time to think, he shoved me hard against the wall of the old gas station. My breath was knocked out of me. I could feel the cold brick pressing against my back, the roughness of it scraping against my skin. I struggled to breathe, but before I could push away, a knife appeared in front of my face. It gleamed under the faint streetlight, its blade rusty and chipped, like it had seen too many dark places. The figure's eyes were hidden, his face completely obscured by a ski mask, but I could hear his breathing. Heavy, labored, desperate. "Give me your wallet and phone." His voice was low, rough, barely a growl. I froze. My mind scrambled for something, anything, besides the overwhelming fear that surged through my chest. This wasn't supposed to happen in my town. People didn't rob others here. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The knife pressed against my ribs, and the reality hit me like a cold wave. I couldn't fight him off. I had no choice. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. My phone followed, shaking in my grip. I handed them over, and without another word, he grabbed them, disappearing into the alley like a shadow swallowed by the night. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't sure if I was shaking from the cold or from the terror that had washed over me. I stumbled back to the gas station, my feet dragging, my head spinning. The world felt like it was spinning with me. I dialed 911, my fingers numb. The dispatcher's voice was a blur as I tried to explain what happened. The police arrived quickly, which wasn't a surprise. This town didn't have much crime, so when something happened, it was taken seriously. I told them everything, but the details were so fuzzy, the fear had muddied my memory. They checked the CCTV cameras around the gas station. The footage was grainy, but it showed a masked figure moving in and out of the frame quickly, too fast for the camera to get a good shot. His face was hidden, his features obscured by the mask. No clear lead. My phone had been turned off, making it harder to track. For days, nothing happened. I tried to carry on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every night, I kept expecting that same masked figure to appear from the shadows, and I couldn't bring myself to walk home anymore. I drove, despite the gas prices, and parked right outside my place. Then, the breakthrough came. One evening, a call came in from the police. My credit card had been used at a gas station just a few miles from where I had been attacked. The police had reviewed the footage, and when I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was Eric Mitchell. Eric. My best friend since we were kids. We grew up together, played baseball, rode bikes through the woods, and shared all our dreams of leaving this town. We'd been inseparable. But after high school, our paths split. I focused on work, on making a life for myself. Eric. He got involved in gambling. Debt. People who didn't care about him. The police tracked him down at a rundown motel on the edge of town. They didn't have to chase him. When they arrived, Eric didn't run. He didn't resist. He just sat there, head hanging low, as if he already knew what was coming. I couldn't believe it. My mind refused to connect the dots at first. Eric? Not him. He was my friend. He couldn't have done this. The police called me in for questioning. When I walked into the room, my heart sank. There he was, my childhood friend. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. He barely looked up when I walked in. But when he did, there was something in his eyes. Something I couldn't quite place. Shame. Regret. Desperation. "You could have just asked for help, man," I whispered, my voice barely above a murmur. Eric's lips twisted into something that resembled a bitter smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Would you have given me $1,000? His voice cracked. A cold silence settled between us. The question hung there, unanswered. The answer was obvious, though. I wouldn't have been able to help him. Not the way he needed. Eric was charged with armed robbery. The court sentenced him to 5 years in prison. I didn't feel any sense of justice. All I felt was loss and betrayal. I never fully recovered. The friendship I had with Eric died that night. It wasn't just the robbery. It was everything that led up to it. The lies, the choices he made, and the fact that in the end, he chose to hurt me rather than reach out for help. Some scars don't fade. I stopped walking home after that. The streets no longer felt safe. The silence, once comforting, now felt suffocating.